Cynthia Brenwall attended the Pratt and Venice program in 2007 and earned a dual degree in the um, Master of Theory, Criticism, and History of Art, Design, and Architecture through the Art History Department, as well as the Library and Information Science Masters from Pratt Institute. Since graduating, she has worked for the New York City Municipal Archives as a paper conservator and preservation specialist. It was the foundation provided by the Materials and Techniques courses held both in Venice and in Brooklyn that led to further paper conservation training. In her role at the archives, Cynthia has worked to care for some of New York City's most important historical documents, including the original drawings and plans for Central Park. Her work on these drawings led to her first book, titled The Central Park Original Designs for New York's Greatest Treasure, which was published by Abrams in 2019. We had it on display in the show last year. I'm delighted to welcome Cynthia Brenwall, who will talk about gold in Venice.
Thank you. Let's see. 1 moment. And... all right. Good afternoon. I'm so thrilled to be here to help celebrate Pratt and Venice's 35th anniversary. As Deanna said in her introduction, I'm a 2007 alum of Pratt and Venice, and in 2009 and 10, I used that experience as inspiration for my thesis, where I focused on gold in the Venetian Republic from 1233 to 1500. I've always been very interested in the studying the background or the historical aspects that influence the art world. Time, politics, place, religion, and economy all play a role in shaping how artists and craftsmen work. And to me, the study of a widely used precious metal in opulent Venice allowed me to interweave the history and the art of the city for a fuller look at the period. So, in Venice, a city known for its splendor and luxury, gold took many forms. Its value and importance to the Republic cannot be overestimated. By focusing on 4 distinct aspects of the market for the period of this precious metal in the late medieval and early Renaissance periods, we can see how it influenced not only commerce, but the world of art as well. To begin, it is important to understand how the metal came into the city and how it was processed and to be ready for use. The Venetian gold ducat was the primary coinage in Europe during this period, and the markets of Venice had established the city as a leader in precious metal trade. Thus, an understanding of the role of the mint and some important economic issues of the period showed how gold came into the hands of the city's goldsmiths. As with all trades, the goldsmith's work was governed by the guild. One of the most challenging and important aspects of my research was gaining an understanding of the Venetian system. While difficult to comprehend in the 21st century, guilds and confraternities were intrinsically mixed in daily life of Venetians. Finally, these 3 topics, the market, the mint, and the guild, led to looking at all of the ways gold was used in the arts during the period. Today's talk, I'll give an overview of some of these features with a particular focus on the guilds and the guild structure in the Venetian Republic from 1233, when the government first records statues relating to the Orefici, the Venetian guild for those who worked with gold, until 1500, when there were shifts in the mint, the guild system, and many stylistic changes became evident in artwork of the time. To get an understanding how the marketplace functioned, we must look at how gold came into Venice. Oops, so in general, the mineral resources of the greater Mediterranean of this region have been widely exploited in the ancient times and were essentially exhausted before the fall of the Roman Empire. Therefore, unlike other major trade areas of the time, such as France, Serbia, England, or the Venetian Republic, the Venetian Republic had few mines whose ore or metal would automatically come to the city, the exception being small mines in Crete, which was a Venetian territory. Instead, the mint was reliant predominantly on merchants from abroad who brought gold and silver to Venice to trade for products from the East or to carry with them on further commercial voyages, and on the Venetian citizens who were widely known to speculate on the volatile gold market. Shifts in trade routes and the value of precious metals were not uncommon during the period, but it was the discovery of large gold, silver, and copper mines in the Black Forest, Saxony, and Bohemia that truly brought Venice into prominence in the bullion market in the early part of the 14th century. Because of its ideal location on the Adriatic for trade throughout the Mediterranean region, as well as its proximity to these new mines, Venice lured traders, referred to in general terms as Germans, meaning anyone from north of the Alps, to the busy ports of the Republic. Trade with the Germans was so brisk that the Venetian government imposed tight restrictions on traders to ensure that proper duty was collected. Upon entering the cities, Germans had to, by law, proceed directly to the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, located on the San Marco side of the Grand Canal, almost directly across from the Rialto Bridge. The Fondaco served as a custom house, warehouse, and hotel for merchants arriving from the north. By the middle of the 14th century, Venice's role as leader in the gold market was assured with the continued trade with the north, improved trade routes with Egypt to the south, and finding of more large gold mines in nearby Hungary. While Venice had been minting coins for nearly 500 years, it wasn't until the introduction of the ducat, Venice's first gold coin, with the government control over the flow of gold into the city and its standards became much more highly regulated. The chief control over the movement of gold and silver bullion was overseen by officials called gold estimators, who had offices at the Rialto, that is the market side of the Rialto Bridge, away from the mint and the government offices of San Marco. The office of the estimators was staffed by 2 or 3 goldsmiths who were elected by the Great Council to serve for 1 year in the post. As precious metals entered the city, the metal would be weighed and tested for fineness or purity levels by the estimators. Import duty would be collected by the state, and then the metal was stamped with a seal of the state and placed in a secure bag before it could be sold either to the mint, put up for auction at San Marco or the Rialto markets, or it was formed into small 6.5-ounce bars to be sold to the goldsmiths. As with most European cities in the late Middle Ages and throughout the Renaissance, Venice's professional structure was built on the guild system. The workings of the system were complicated and interweaving trades of trade, religion, politics, and their function varied with their craft. In the building and shipping trades, they worked more as a modern day union, while in others such as glass or gold work, they were much more like a trade association in which regulatory powers were given to the government. All trade guilds had statutes that were established to protect both its merchants and its customers, and to ensure the quality of workmanship and prevent unfair trade. The city's guilds were made up of 2 components, the arte and the scuola, that were interwoven in a way that it's hard to understand in a modern view. The arte was the association of those practicing the same or related occupations, while the scuola was a religious-based social institution for laymen, and sometimes women, who gathered for the purpose of religious practice, banqueting, the distribution of alms, and for the care and burial of its members. There were scuola representing many groups throughout Venice, and one might belong to more than one of these groups. In general, the scuola philosophy encouraged the suspension of everyday class divisions amongst its members so that everyone could enjoy a sense of equality as both Christians and Venetians, regardless of social standings. The purpose of the arte component of the guild was to regulate craft discipline, the production and quality, to organize professional activity, and to settle disputes amongst its members. While some other cities in this period had strict demarcation between specific trades, the guilds in Venice were more of an umbrella covering of related groups, which provided flexibility in the marketplace. Each arte had its own statutes that were recorded in the Senate records, which gave the government an opportunity to monitor guild activity that directly affected the economy of the city. By putting the scuola and the arte together, we have the Escuela Del Arte, or a religious confraternity associated with a particular trade guild. Belonging to the Escuela del Arte was mandatory for all of those who worked in a particular trade. And it's important to understand that the work, social, and religious actions of these groups were intertwined into everyday life. Feasting and banqueting, participating in processions were activities of the scuola that strengthened the bonds between its members. Throughout the year, nearly 90 days when all work throughout the city would be suspended, while religious festivals, state occasions, patron saint days were celebrated. Processions through the city were highlighted by carrying of Escuela banners, the burning of candles, and special decorations, which all worked together to bring the brotherhood of the guilds into the public life of the city. As with all Escuela del Arte, the goldsmith's devotional life revolved around the church altar established to honor its patron saint. In the case of the Venetian goldsmiths, Saint Anthony Abbot. As early as 1215, the Scuola degli Orefici had made their confraternal home at the Church of San Giacomo di Rialto, which is located on the Ruga degli Orefici, directly across from the workshops and storefronts of the city's goldsmiths. By looking at Canaletto's later painting, we can see that the Rialto Bridge in the background with the market stalls of the goldsmiths on the right. Even today, the street is the traditional location of the city's jewelers and goldsmiths. As a trades, goldsmiths were organized vertically, from the lowest gold beaters or battellori who spent their day hammering out gold leaf to master jewelers and goldsmiths who met the public. Training for this important trade was long and arduous and required a mastery of a broad range of skills. Goldsmiths were called upon to assay gold and silver, which determined its purity of the precious metal, serve as mint officials, conduct trade in bullion and coins in the marketplace, and be able to produce work with related artistic trade guilds. A 15th century Venetian merchant's manual stated that goldsmiths and jewelers were noble artists, and that they would do well to be both eloquent and affable, since they were in constant conversations with lords and gentlemen. It went on to say that the work of the smith needed to be carried out with scrupulous attention to quality, with guild standards buttressed by gentlemen and a code of honor. In addition to enforcing their own statutes and standards, the guilds also provided interdisciplinary work with other artists. Contracts between members of the Orefici and those in guilds of painters, leather workers, sculptors, and many others show us how important the smiths were to the general art market in the city. Related trades often shared commissions and work with one another. In their creation of luxury items, several artists from different guilds would be involved in the creation of a single piece. For example, an elaborately framed painting of the period would require work not only from the Painters Guild, but a master frame maker, a gold beater to hammer out the sheets of gold leaf for the gilding, a goldsmith to apply the leaf to the gold frame, and yet another member of the Painters Guild to add any gold detail to the painting. Now, with a general understanding of some of the background issues relating to gold in the art market, it's finally time to look at some of the spectacular uses of the metal in the period. When thinking of gold in Venice, you might automatically go to the richly gilded paintings that Venetian painters were famous for, or glittering illuminated manuscript pages, or even beautiful sculpture laden with gold leaf. But I thought it might be a little more interesting to talk about some of the lesser known uses for gold in the period. Reworking objects taken as spoils of war was an excellent way to look at some of the work done by the hands of Venetian goldsmiths. The gold-mounted rock crystal jowl that is now part of the treasury of San Marco. This crystal was carved in Iraq sometime in the 10th century and came to Venice as part of the plunder during the Fourth Crusades. It was not uncommon for wealthy Venetian citizens to pay for elaborate decorations to be added to objects as a way of showing their devotion to God. In this piece, we can see the ornate filigree work that Venetian smiths became famous for. In fact, they were so renowned for this technique that it was commonly called Venetian work throughout Europe of this period. In most cases, artisans used gold leaf or gold powder for their decoration. Gold leaf was made by carefully hammering out sheets of gold between two boards. It was important that the battellori, or the gold beater, heated the metal to soften it between each rounds of hammering. This was hard and dirty work, and it took many repeated rounds of heating the metal and hammering it until it was considered leaf. Gold powder, on the other hand, used to illuminate manuscripts for decorative elements on paintings, was actually a byproduct of gold leaf. Leaf was ground on porphyry bowls or slabs with salt and honey until it was completely broken up. The mixture was then carefully rinsed, allowed to dry, and then was ready for use. Glass is another excellent example of a different trade using gold. Glassmaking in the Venetian Republic had a long history, as did the use of gold to embellish it. While blown glass vessels were produced as early as the 7th century on the Venetian islands of Torcello and Murano, it wasn't until the early 13th century that more artistic productions of glass were started. With the fall of Damascus, a city known for fine glass production, in 1400, and with Constantinople in 1453, a large influx of highly skilled craftsmen came into the city, which firmly established Venice as a premier center for glassmaking, as it's still known today. Gold was applied to blown glass in two forms. Either it was used as leaf or liquid gold, which was powdered gold suspended in a light oil or gum arabic. Leaf was added to the glass by adhering pre-cut patterns with an adhesive, or for larger patterns by covering the surface with leaf and then scraping the metal away to form patterns. Liquid gold was painted directly onto the glass with a paintbrush or stylus. After either form was used, it was added to the glass, the decorative object had to be slowly reheated in a kiln to fuse the gold to the glass. Since Byzantine time, elaborate mosaics with golden backgrounds were the highlight of early dome churches throughout the region, and those in Venice are no different. From Torcello to San Marco, glittering glass tesserae or tiles were pieced together around pictorial elements to create gold fields that invoked heaven-like quality of scenes. We are extremely lucky to have a modern day way of looking how these tesserae were made using a very traditional method with our friends at Orsoni in Venice. The gold tesserae were made by sandwiching a sheet of gold between two layers of glass, a supporting sheet of cast glass on the bottom. The glass we see here in this slide is the gold is going on to the cartolina, a thin layer of glass. Next, they heat up a large plate of glass that has been cast. They attach the cartolina with the glass in the middle and then heat it again and flatten it until they are fully fused. After the glass is cooled, it can be cut by hand into small tesserae and used for the making of these mosaics. Not even the briefest overview of gold in Venice would be complete without at least a glimpse at the Polidoro, quite possibly the most well-known and important part of the treasury of San Marco. The grand gold panel is a culmination of the spectacular use of gold within Venetian Republic and the quintessential example of Venetian artisans reworking objects taken from the East. Originally commissioned in 976, many of the most precious enamels and much of the gold were assembled in the top register after the Fourth Crusade in 1209. The Paula was finally brought to its current state by Venice's most talented master goldsmiths in 1345, with the addition of many of the gemstones and the Gothic frame. By exploring the role of, gold and its important roles it played in Venice during this period, my hope is that a fuller understanding of the works of the early art market has emerged. Through my research, I have been convinced that the guilds were the key to truly gaining access to the world of the artisans, as they were woven into both the social and professional aspects of daily life in the city. By looking at just a few of these related trades who made the gold work, we can see this precious metal provide a link between the artisans of this dynamic and visually stunning art period. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. That was wonderful. It made me remember the whole process of that thesis and also the role that Dorothy Shepard, who's here today, who helped push you to look at how the gold came in. I remember she was the second reader on that. So thank you, Dorothy.
Yes, thank you, Dorothy.
Okay, 5 minutes for questions for Cynthia. Faye, do you have some in the chat?
I don't see any, but my internet unfortunately had pooped out for a little bit, so I was forced to leave and come back. So my chat window is empty, so I'm gonna have to beg Joe and see if he sees any questions in the chat window.
There are no questions for Cynthia yet, but I want to ask a question about.
There's one from Jesse. It just came in, so keep it in mind.
Cynthia, could you say a little bit about the training of metalsmiths, metal workers in Venice? Is it directed through the guilds, or how does that work?
It was definitely directed through the guilds, and it was a process much like painters, where you start at the basic of learning how to maybe grind paints or do the basic simple processes. They worked in shops and they worked their way up. And it seems, from what I remember of my research going back a while now, it was generally a 10 to 15 year kind of apprenticeship through the guild as you worked up. And in the end, you had to make a masterpiece that was presented to the guild that you would actually, if it was accepted, you would then become a member of the Orefici.
I see a question from Jessie Sullivan, who is one of our presenters. I was wondering if you could speak to the connection of gold to the venticolori.
It was different. The gold beaters actually made the gold, and it was sold through the goldsmiths. Was not sold through the venticolore. That was a different, again, a related trade, how they work together. So an artist would actually have to go and talk to the goldsmiths rather than the color sellers.
And I apologize, Victoria, I skipped over your question. I just see it now. Wonderful talk, Cynthia. I'm curious if you encountered any usage of gold leaf or inlay in fresco or wall paintings.
Yeah, absolutely. There was definitely used kind of a sgraffito method on some of the frescoes in the city. So essentially, the gold would be actually underneath the fresco material and then scraped away. So it was very often used as a highlight, or a very expensive way to do a highlight on, say, a flowing gown, and to shape that highlight. You can also see them in some of the around an angel or a putti, the little halos oftentimes were colored with gold leaf.
From Christina Rosati, is there any evidence of gold coming into Venice from Africa? And also, I understand that Venetian glass beads may have been traded in Africa, perhaps as early as this period.
Definitely, that was one of the trade routes coming from Egypt and Tanzania, perhaps. So there was definitely a route that was one of the, before the mines in the north were discovered, that was their major route of bringing gold into the city, was through that way up from Africa up the Adriatic. So when learning about the gold routes and how the gold came into the city was really a fascinating part of doing this research.
Did we get Victoria's question? Or I think we skipped over her question.
No, I saw her question.
Oh, okay.
I apologize that I skipped over her. We have a question from Margaret Matz. Cynthia, are there any Venetian manuscripts in the New York Public Library that are gilded? If so, what manuscripts are in their holdings?
Oh, that is a little outside my knowledge. I would certainly imagine there would be some in the rare book library, but I was studying more of the techniques rather than actual holdings in the city. And the Met certainly does. I can say that.
If we have time for one more question from Roshanika Raskovich. The earliest trade of gold and precious metal, how was it recorded, and is there a price mentioned?
I don't recall anything about prices specifically, and anything really by the time the mint starts being producing the ducat. Before the ducat, they were trading mostly in silver. I think that's when the standards were then kept more tightly by the state, because it was much more of they had a hand in it. So I know by 1233 is when the Orefici were already established, so they were certainly keeping rules like that.
Okay, we're going right on time. This is wonderful. Cynthia, that was wonderful. I forgot all that wonderful detail about how the gold gets to Venice, and I remembered all the colonnelli of the gold, but I forgot about all that detail about how it comes in, and I remembered Dorothy pushing you on that. That was great, really wonderful. All that
Thank you so much. I'm glad that I still found it really interesting 10 years later.
So. Yeah, well, it was these are wonderful.